Hey, welcome back, everyone. So today I want to talk about what's kind of happening with this Mar-a-Lago raid because I think this is kind of a pivotal moment, let's say, for the country, and in a couple different ways. On one side, this could be the Watergate for Biden. This could be Biden's Watergate, just frankly. This could also expose a lot of corruption within the FBI and the justice system. Already, in fact, there's some movement on that, including the fact that Durham is already investigating the FBI agents who carried out the raid, not to mention the fact that even the judge who signed the raid warrant, himself might have had some conflicts of interest because I'll go into it. At the same time, though, this may go the other way, and this may be used for a kind of Patriot purge, which is kind of one of the topics I want to talk about today. On one side of that as well, that's raising some awareness over the fact that the FBI has kind of become a bit dirty in a lot of ways. In fact, they're even incriminating people, targeting people, planting evidence. There's evidence of this, in fact. And also targeting journalists and monitoring American citizens in ways that are probably not legal. I'm going to be explaining this today, kind of all sides of where this could possibly head, and also give some updates on the Mar-a-Lago raid, and I think what the broader significance of this is, and also some of the big stuff, including that the FBI actually, not only could this be, again, Biden's Watergate, the FBI may have actually committed a crime itself on at least one front, possibly more, but at least one major front, which is they might have stolen attorney-client privileged information from Trump. It looks like some of this was, in fact, documents going after Spygate and possibly related to Trump's lawsuit against Hillary Clinton, which makes this a whole different story and would make this much, much larger. This is, again, kind of a watershed moment for America. It's not clear which direction it's going to go yet. I'm going to explain what this means, though, and some of the possibilities. Also, folks, interesting update with all this. Big crisis hits. Biden's being accused basically of raiding his political opponent for 2024. Again, Watergate Part 2. As they're facing all this pressure, the CDC comes out and basically ends the pandemic. I'm going to explain to you what's happening with that. If you understand kind of the way totalitarian powers work, there's a breaking point with things, and if they hit the breaking point, they need to release the pressure valve. And when I saw them do this, it looked like they just kind of they're like, uh-oh, pressure's too high, turn the valve, let off some of that steam, and they decided to end the pandemic. I'm going to show you that as well. Folks, it'll be a great episode today, so stick around. Those of you on YouTube as well, we will be jumping over exclusive to Epic TV after about 20-25 minutes. And folks, you may have seen also, we did a special report on the Mar-a-Lago raid. If you haven't watched that, be sure to check it out. That was a doozy putting together. I think I pulled an all-nighter doing that one. And our video editing team, they worked really hard on it. But really, we tried pulling together all the different major players, a lot of key figures with key information, and just put it in one place for y'all. So if you watch that watch that special feature, it's about half an hour, you'll get a pretty complete view of what happened and what is happening with that raid. All right, folks, that said, let's go into the first story. I want to talk about this Patriot trap. And let me show you kind of just to introduce this topic. Epic Times had a story on a special ops veteran canceling plans for a protest at FBI headquarters after warnings of a potential trap. Let me explain. It says, in the wake of the unexpected fallout sparked by an August 8 media pitch, a military veteran has revised his plans to hold a protest at the FBI headquarters in Washington on Sunday, August 14th. Following the unprecedented raid on the Mar-a-Lago residence of former President Donald Trump, an August 8 media pitch announced that the 20-year military and former special ops veteran named Adam Hardage was calling on fellow veterans and Americans in all walks of life to join him, so on. I won't go into all of this. But basically, he was advised, that there may be an incident that would possibly try to incriminate them. And further in the story, it says an August 11th report from Trump's supporters were warning people to, quote, beware of possible FBI agents urging rebellion. Another social media post warned of the FBI, saying, "We advise individuals taking part in protest activities to remain aware in their immediate surroundings and to report any suspicious activity to local law enforcement." Warnings of entrapment were followed by misinformation. The host of one social media video wrongfully attributed a quote from another concerned veteran mentioned at the end of one report to Hardage, inaccurately insisting that Hardage said he wasn't even planning on attending his own protest. Now, what does this mean? There's two different sides to this. It depends which side you want to kind of take, I guess. On one side of it, there is real concern that the FBI may be trying to entrap people. There's legitimate concern right now, and I think very widespread concern right now, especially more so among the Trump supporters, that basically they're worried people are trying to bait them into committing acts of violence. And if they do that, the Biden administration can basically radicalize the idea of the Trump movement. They can use that to target Trump or possibly even arrest Trump. Trump becomes, the terrorist leader of America, and then they can do a Patriot purge, so to speak. That is a legitimate concern of many Americans right now. And we've, of course, seen some of the leaked documents. Project Veritas recently leaked some internal Department of Homeland Security reports detailing what they're considering to be extremist symbols. Those extremist symbols now include many classical American symbols, including, for example, the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. They're even trying to go after the legacy of Ashley Babbitt to try to label her as an extremist by basically showing that she had symbols like the "Don't Tread on Me" flag, or like the Punisher skull, which is used by the Navy SEALs. These images that were not considered extremist in any way, but are now being considered extremist symbols because they relate to American patriotism and they relate to the Trump movement. This is, of course, raising concern, and again, legitimate concern, that Merrick Garland may be going after average Americans as potential domestic terrorists. Now, ANF, that's the Betsy Ross flag, the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. Now, with this, basically, this is not in any way like an illegitimate concern. We've watched the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland target parents, for example, potentially in terrorist investigations, because they're going to these school board meetings and they're making their concerns heard about what's being taught to their kids. Now, it should be noted that these school boards, of course, published a public letter, went to Biden, went to the FBI, and claimed that these parents should be investigated as terrorists. Now, that was a ridiculous claim, as we remember, because there was no evidence presented of terrorist threat, of terrorist violence. There was no criminal reports. In other words, even if they were claiming that these were potential terrorist acts, they did not even have enough evidence to call the police or file police reports. In other words, it was a claim based on no evidence. Now, that, of course, raised a lot of concerns among Americans that the government may be, in fact, trying to target them as terrorists. And we've also watched what happened to individuals who went to protest on January 6th. People who are being called terrorists when the criminal charges are things like protesting or parading and things like this. Now, let me show you a bit more so that's one side. Let me be clear. So that's one side of the concern, right? The other side of the concern is on the FBI side, and they do believe that basically because they've so badly... The funny thing is they're blaming public discourse. They're blaming the public for criticizing them, when in reality they kind of brought it on themselves. The FBI is unhappy right now that the American people are criticizing its behavior, basically. And they're saying that, we're patriots, these are good people, they've done many good things, and, the system of justice should not be criticized, essentially. A bit ridiculous. It's a bit ridiculous. But, in fact, let me show you this document with the FBI signs, by the way. Sorry, was it FBI, not Department of Homeland Security? I'll talk about that a little more in a sec. They're telling people basically right now, how dare you criticize us and so on, and this could lead to violence, and they condemn that. The reality is they kind of brought this on themselves. But it is raising a real concern, I think, even among patriotic Americans, where they are in fact concerned that someone's going to be stupid and carry out an act of violence. We know that someone recently tried to raid one of the FBI offices and was shot and killed. But if someone does do that, that one individual will be used basically as a, people would say false flag or just a trigger incident to justify this whole, domestic terror threat narrative. If that does happen, really, they will very likely start targeting people as such. And let me show you that document again, folks. Now, look at these symbols. Many of you have seen these symbols, the Betsy Ross flag. Others, you even have, libertarian symbols, things that are very, very common among patriotic Americans. If they have an incident that justifies that kind of crackdown, well, it is possible they may roll it out because they've been talking about it basically since Trump left office. Now, let me show you this. This is Twitter. This is from John Cardillo. It says, multiple federal LE law enforcement sources are telling me that a message was blasted to all federal LE law enforcement agencies to start cataloging social media posts of known conservative influencers so they can be threat assessed. They're coming for the First Amendment and anyone who opposes the regime. Now, that's a pretty serious accusation. It's suggesting basically folks like me, right? People who have YouTube channels or conservative influencers, I suppose I'd fall under that banner, will in fact be targeted now by federal agents who want to assess whether they're making any kind of extremist statements or anything that could be defined as such. Now, one problem with that is, of course, they've kind of redefined what extremism is because they've redefined domestic terrorism as white nationalism, and white nationalism they've redefined as racism, and racism they've redefined as basically being capitalism, so or American patriotism. So if you believe in the Founding Fathers and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and you believe in the free market, that by definition means that you believe in the history of white nationalism, which is the new narrative of racism, which means you're an extremist, which means you may be targeted. And so they've broadened and altered these terms to such an extent that they can start doing this. Now, briefly on that, this is, if those of you who know the history of Soviet disinformation, if you want a good book on this, by the way, I recommend Disinformation by Ion Mihai Pacepa and Ronald Reichlak. Disinformation, Ion Mihai Pacepa, Ronald Reichlak. If you understand the history of Soviet disinformation, what it works on doing is altering the footnotes. You change the foundation of narratives. You change the foundation, right? And then you build narratives on top of that foundation. The altering of the definition of racism, which really is now just capitalism, essentially. That's how they've redefined it. The redefinition of extremism. They've altered these things, and they use those words in the legal sense, right? So they've built false narratives on top of a false foundation, and then they begin using that politically. This is how disinformation actually works. I mean, real disinformation, not this stupid stuff a lot of these clowns talk about, frankly. But the idea now is, will they actually target influencers? Will they actually target journalists? And frankly, folks, they already are. They're already doing this. And so I would actually take this post seriously, this warning. I would take it seriously because, again, they're already doing this. The concern now would be that they're actually expanding it. Let me show you a few examples. Tucker Carlson, New York Post, June 2021. It said here, Tucker Carlson claims the NSA is spying on him. And let me play a video where Tucker Carlson's talking about this. I'll show you what he says.
The government is spying on. Yesterday, we heard from a whistleblower within the U.S. government who reached out to warn us that the NSA, the National Security Agency, is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take this show off the air. Now, that's a shocking claim, and ordinarily we'd be skeptical of it. It's illegal for the NSA to spy on American citizens. It's a crime. It's not a third world country. Things like that should not happen in America. But unfortunately, they do happen, and in this case, they did happen. The whistleblower, who is in a position to know, repeated back to us information about a story that we are working on that could have only come directly from my texts and emails. There's no other possible source for that information, period. The NSA captured that information without our knowledge and did it for political reasons. The Biden administration is spying on us. We have confirmed that.
There you go. Tucker Carlson, one example, claiming the NSA is spying on him with the intent to take his show offline, trying to incriminate him, take his show offline. He's not the only one. James O'Keefe, another big example of this. Project Veritas had a report on this that the FBI in Southern District of New York had raided their offices, including their homes, raided James O'Keefe's home, arrested him. Let me show you James O'Keefe talking about this. What happened to him? Here's a video here.
By making this statement, I am putting myself at great risk because on November 4th, Project Veritas came under attack. I awoke to the news that apartments and homes of Project Veritas journalists, or former journalists, had been raided by FBI agents. It appears the Southern District of New York now has journalists in their sights for the supposed crime of doing their jobs lawfully and honestly. Or at least this journalist. I had to think long and hard before making this statement. It's a decision that only I can make. They don't want me to defend myself and immediately tried to silence me. That's why the cover letter to the grand jury subpoena we received contains this language. Quote, "The government hereby requests that you voluntarily refrain from disclosing the existence of the subpoena to any third party. While you are under no obligation to comply with our request, we are requesting you not to make any disclosure in order to preserve the confidentiality of the investigation and because the disclosure of the existence of this investigation might interfere with and impede the investigation," unquote. But while the Department of Justice requested us to not disclose the existence of the subpoena, something very unusual happened. Within an hour of one of our reporters' homes being secretly raided by the FBI, the New York Times, who we are currently suing for defamation, contacted the Project Veritas reporter to ask for comment. We do not know how the New York Times was aware of the execution of a search warrant at our reporter's home or the subject matter of the search warrant, as a grand jury investigation is secret.
Now, folks, he's not alone. So basically, just like Tucker Carlson, James O'Keefe was alleging that not only was he targeted by federal agents, not only was, well, in his case, actually raided, but it was politically motivated. Because as Tucker Carlson notes, his was politically motivated, right? The one that he was allegedly being targeted in. James O'Keefe notes that his evidence that it's politically motivated was that the FBI, while telling him to not release any information, which he chose to do anyways, they had leaked the information to the New York Times. The New York Times got what should have been sealed information, and the New York Times and James O'Keefe are actually involved in a lawsuit. James is suing them for defamation, which also means that they gave the FBI provided, the individuals he's in a lawsuit against with evidence against him, which is even more serious because this is federal involvement in a lawsuit, two people trying to fight each other in court. Let me show you one more example of this. This is Cheryl Atkinson. Now, keep in mind, folks, this is long before the Trump raid. This is a couple years back, year back. This has been going on for a while now. Let me show you this video. This is Representative Ken Buck in a video talking about Cheryl Atkinson, a not necessarily conservative journalist, but just a good investigative journalist. Let me show you this.
Director Wray, you and I are public officials. Media criticism comes with the job. Some criticism may be unfair. In fact, much of the criticism may be unfair, but a free press is indispensable to our republic. America is better because of Cheryl Atkinson and investigative journalists. The American people deserve to know the truth about their government, including with respect to Fast and Furious, Solyndra, and Benghazi. So did the Obama administration thank Cheryl Atkinson for her work? Did the White House recognize her for keeping the public informed and holding government accountable? Did President Obama present her with a Presidential Medal of Freedom? No. Using a highly politicized FBI, the administration spied on her. And that's what small-minded people do. Government emails show the Obama White House plotted to silence her stories. After suspicious incidents involving her home internet, computers, and phones, Atkinson hired a forensic computer expert who determined she was hacked by an IP address used by the FBI to conduct domestic surveillance, and that spyware proprietary to the federal government and several classified files had been inserted on her computer. CBS News, Ms. Atkinson's employer, undertook a second forensic exam confirming those conclusions. Former government officials, including one from the FBI, later admitted that they took part in this illegal surveillance.
Now, folks, it actually went even beyond that. When Cheryl Atkinson was testifying, she actually said that she was threatened and she was told by these agents, allegedly, right? She was told by these agents that they would plant child pornography on the computer of her husband, meaning they wanted to plant incriminating evidence to try to basically throw her husband in prison, and that was being used as a pressure point to try to silence her. Now, again, she was not like a conservative journalist. She was, I believe, with CBS at the time, folks. But this is what's happening. It is a legitimate concern for many Americans right now. Of course, the main targets, it seems to be, are kind of people involved in information, of course. As, again, we just discussed in terms of kind of the rumors going around that they've launched a larger program to assess whether journalists or conservative influencers are spreading, let's just say, spreading extremism, I guess is how they're framing it. Now, I'm going to go a bit deeper into this. But I want to say, first of all, again, this is something you see under any kind of socialist system once they take power. I'll give an example of Yuri Bezmenov, who I've talked about frequently. If you haven't watched his videos online, I highly recommend them, by the way. One of you was so nice as to send me a copy of his book, which was Love Letter to America, written under his pseudonym, which was Thomas Schumann. And there's something interesting in there, which he says that, again, Yuri Bezmenov was a Soviet defector. He worked for the KGB, and his job was to basically do influence operations, take what he calls useful idiots on tours through Russia, journalists, influencers from the West, and give them the whole Potemkin village treatment, where they show them false things and say, oh, there's no concentration camps in Russia. Russia is beautiful. Everybody's very happy here. We have, the largest production of grain in the entire world. And the journalists are like, oh, yeah, wonderful. And he said that they're even just telling them stuff that nobody could possibly believe, with the hopes of these brain-dead, journalists going to Russia at the time. I would actually just think that maybe they were being lied to, but he says they just ate it all up like a bunch of dogs, basically. Eventually, he defected to the West and made public a lot of what the Soviets were doing when it came to ideological subversion. The subversion of ideology. And ideology is one of the main focuses for a lot of Soviet and modern communist operations. Ideology is the basis of everything. It determines who you vote for, it determines what you buy, it determines what you like, what you don't like, it determines what you think is good and what you think is evil. Everything is informed by information. And so who controls the information, controls these decisions, controls these perceptions, and controls all these things. And when you're dealing with communists or socialists, this is, of course, not only a key, juicy target because they can use it, but also one of the key threats that they face. In current times, for example, we can look to the Chinese Communist Party, which has the three warfares doctrine adopted into its military code, which is focused on ideological subversion. The three categories they have are media warfare, psychological warfare, and legal warfare. Manipulation of the legal systems, control of all outlets of information, and also psychological warfare, which is worldview warfare, which is changing the way people perceive information, changing, again, the perception, the disinformation, the control of information, right? And then using that as the foundation for the building blocks of perception, this worldview warfare. Now, when it came to ideological subversion, or basically the process of communist takeover, one thing Bezmenov was doing, which made him defect, is he was active in India. He was assigned there as a foreign linguist. And his job was to collect information on every individual of influence. They made databases on them. They collected information on them. And the purpose of that was, as soon as the Soviets took over, they would kill all those people. Every one of them. They would kill them all, right? And the reason was this. Either that or just subvert them. And the reason was this. They had to eliminate all of the influencers, all of the journalists, anybody who would criticize the regime, anybody who had influence over public ideology needed to be co-opted or killed. And the concerning thing right now when it comes to the Biden administration, although I don't think they're going to send out hitmen against journalists right now, the concerning thing is that they are trying to basically destroy people's reputations, target people politically, throw them in jail, plant false evidence, arrest them, and who knows what else. They are, in fact, doing this. And whether they're doing it on a large scale is currently being alleged. I don't know if that's true or not, but we have seen what they've done previously, again, over the individuals that I showed you. Folks, I want to go a lot deeper into this. That said, let's jump over to Epic TV for the rest of this. There's a lot of stuff I can't talk about on YouTube. If I talk about YouTube, they'll probably delete my channel. At this point, frankly, they delete my channel, but I'd like to keep it at least as long as I can, because I know a lot of you do watch this show on YouTube, and so, again, I want to keep it. And also, it's nice to have something public, but Epic TV, we can talk about a lot of things we cannot talk about on YouTube. So come join us now. Jump into the description below the video. Again, we have free trials available, so come check out Epic TV. Let me also show you a trailer we did of the special feature on Mar-a-Lago, because I think we tried to really kind of take all the major information and put it in one place for y'all. Let me show you that now.
I think it's entirely unprecedented.
Totally unprecedented. It's never happened before. We've never seen anything like this.
It's unprecedented.
Because it's never happened in American history, and it shouldn't have happened.
And this brings up a larger question because we're in a revolutionary cycle.
This is the modern day version of Watergate.
To me, it makes Watergate look rather small by comparison.
So the whole idea that Biden doesn't know anything is preposterous. It's just not true.
Their number one goal, and it has been this way since day one, is to stop Donald J. Trump from being president of the United States.
It's political showmanship. I'm not worried about any of it. Donald Trump didn't commit a crime.
This is a corrupt politicization of law enforcement in our country.
The greatest threat to the United States of America is denial. This is the defining moment of the entire Biden presidency.
They know it. They're definitely targeting President Trump because they don't want to run for president again. It's that simple.
How we act right now will be discussed for generations to come.
We cannot deny what is happening to our justice system.
All right, folks, that special feature will debunk a lot of what you might have heard. It will debunk a lot of the false reports a lot of your friends and family may have heard. So be sure to watch it. Help spread the word on it. Get the word out on it. Be sure to watch it. Again, that's on Epic TV. All right, so we jump over now. See you there. All right, folks. Those of you curious, the tea today is a white tea. White peony, actually. It's very good. In my January 6th mug, by the way. We do have a gift shop now, by the way, also.